Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first. Abandon all thoughts. Thoughts are the seeds of action. As thoughts arise, attention moves towards them, from the source towards the thoughts, from its resting place towards the thoughts, endlessly moving away from its resting place, from its source. Abandon the thoughts. Remain at the source. So, good morning, everyone. Just reminding that we use WhatsApp as a means of communication. Okay, so we'll talk about a little bit about conditions, optimal conditions for a seeker of truth, lifestyle, which is more suitable. So, this is important for you to be able to look at your own life and, by comparison, look at the more suitable conditions so that you can reflect a little bit and see where you're going instead of where you should be going. So everybody likes to read about the lives of saints, sages, because more or less for them they represent the highest aspects, that which symbolizes the quest for truth, the adventure of it, all of it. Now, if you compare this with your life, you'll have to see if it's different, similar. What are you living? For you to understand in which direction are you really walking. But usually, people tend to say, oh, but this is just for saints and for sages. It is a way to justify the continuous way to embrace that which you know it's not suitable. So, the life of a monk, for example, the monastic life, it is one of the best ones for spiritual discipline. Of course, not perfect, but in terms of examples that you can look, the monastic life is one type of example of a life which is more suitable in its whole, And monastic life is different from being a monk. It is different. It can be the same, but it doesn't really necessarily is the same. One of the It's not a problem because it is a matter of that which is more suitable to that seeker at that level of that period in time. So for those circumstances, it is fine. But into a broader spectrum, the monastic life is the best one, removing the part of the, how do you call that, the vows that are made. This, for the seeker of truth, can be a hindrance. Of course, it doesn't allow that which is detrimental, but it brings also rigidity, unnecessary, if not necessary. I'm not disqualifying one thing. I'm opening up, broadening it. because it is a very particular situation. So being a monk, it is one thing. Living a monastic life, it is something else. Of course, those rigid vows, they help you not to divert somewhere. But it also has, like everything, has its downsides. And for the seeker of truth, the only vow which is important, fundamental, vital, it is to follow guidance no matter what. No matter what is asked. This is the only vow which really makes sense to keep everything alive, everything fluid. Of course, for the seeker of well-being, this is a green flag to do whatever monks don't do because they have made vows for it. But for the serious seeker, it doesn't mean this at all. And these words are for the serious seeker, of course. But as you think about a monk's life, you will have an idea of the differences of the life that you are living. And if you can take that as the shortest road, that lifestyle, then you can imagine what does the life that you are having implies in terms of the distance of that road towards your goal. Of course, these are just general points, but good ones for reflection. A life of a seeker of truth is not a life of glamour, not a glamorous life, of course. It is a life of simplicity. It is a life of working out your illusions, not of favoring them. It is a life of constant work, renouncing all of its fruits. It is a life of disappearing from the eyes of the world, becoming more and more visible towards the eyes of God. It is a life of renunciation of dreams, hopes, expectations, dreams, hopes, expectations. It is a life where that window that you look and you say, I hope that someday this comes true. It is a window that you shut the curtains. Freedom is by all means the only goal in mind. Everything else which is connected to the satisfaction, completion of this individual character with his hopes and dreams that just fit a narrative. Because if the narrative wasn't there, those dreams could not be there. They would be senseless. So the efforts that you are undertaking, for the majority of you, they are a need because of the context. That's it. Only that. No absolute value, meaning it's just circumstantial. If the circumstance disappear, those investments become useless. That's their nature. That's what they really are, useless. So the quest for truth is to dedicate all your life, vitality, and time to the investments that are really worthwhile, to the only investment that makes sense. It is stopping useless investments. It is stopping to waste your time. Dealing less and less with the world. Dealing more and more with the divine. It's not about saving others. If there is service to others, it is a service which is given by guidance, and it is fulfilled in the best of ways, but the attention is not on that service, but on what that service means in your process of freedom, in your own purification. So it's not a direction where you fulfill your dreams or expect to fulfill them. It is a direction where you abandon your dreams, the dreams of the character. So for the seeker of well-being, and both are there in you, the seeker of well-being, the seeker of truth, they cannot feed of the same food because they are opposite in nature. And only one has the power to feed the other, but not as a goal in itself, just as a side effect, because if it is a goal, it doesn't work anymore. Because eventually, all the glories of the seeker of truth become the glories of the seeker of well-being also. Not the journey, but the fruits of it. But the fruits of the seeker of well-being are just vinegar to the seeker of well-truth, the seeker of truth. No nutrition, just bitterness. Sorry. So usually in the beginning, especially, sometimes this idea of a monastic life comes, but in a naive way, in a way that it is envisioned as something which will nurture your individual aspirations. In some sense, the circumstances are, how do you say this, pictured in a way that it fits your highest expectations. But this, of course, cannot sustain itself. To establish in a monastic lifestyle without the vows, all those dependencies that are connected to the seeker of well-being will have to be broken, and it is somehow painful process, depending on the level of those dependencies, of course. So the fundamental is not wasting time. You're in the meditation process, trying to intensify your meditation. At the same time, you're filling your mind with impurities, dense goals, dense aspirations, dense investments. Just by walking into the middle of people which are intensely engaged in survival, in worldly conquests and all of this, it's like walking with a big net on the ocean. You're getting whatever is on the way. So you spend your time cleaning it in meditation, and then as you move, you replenish your stock of impurities. And the minute you are focusing in survival, in satisfaction of own goals, of desires, you are engrossing your own energy. And then you go meditate and trying to make it subtle again. So if you can intensify it hard enough, it will be more or less 2 step forwards, 2 step backwards, 2 step forwards, 2 step backwards. The lifestyle, the monastic lifestyle, it is a lifestyle that more or less doesn't depend too much of the place. But those things are important, of course, but you have to start somewhere. And the conditions of a seeker of truth, they improve as you use in the best way the circumstances you have now. There's lots of you that think, oh, but when I have the suitable conditions, then I will dedicate myself. It doesn't work like that. If you're not making the best use out of the circumstances you have now, no need for better circumstances to come. And this is to say, the idea of the best should be there, but dedication and work, taking the best use of what is there now, it is very important. Because that can lead you to those better circumstances that you are fathoming. It can, but it's not a guarantee. But what's guaranteed is it will direct you to the best circumstances. And that can mean a lot of different things depending on your real needs and not the needs that you imagine. And having this monastic lifestyle as a basis to your own routine, this is a very good reference. And what is impossible today becomes possible tomorrow. And of course, these words, like I always say, they are for the seeker of truth. And there's a why to say this and to remind this always, continuously. Because for the seeker of well-being, then he will say, okay, so one day it will happen. One day it will happen. And these are just excuses to maintain that which is still precious. The seeker of truth gets revealed by the way that he understands things, in the way that he sees them and uses them. He has an opposite stance from the seeker of truth. Seeker of well-being, seeker of truth. Opposite. So the seeker of well-being is a character full of addictions that suffers without them. These addictions are the fruits of circumstances, deprivations that bring aspirations, but it's just circumstantial. So in the way, when you spend time enough dedicated to the quest for truth, with the investments towards the direction of the seeker of well-being in you, eventually those addictions will expire, will take time. And it takes more time because you always find a way to feed them. But if you can manage to remain without feeding it, those addictions, they go away, and then pleasure will start coming from the quest for truth, from the environment, the activities. The problem is to try to walk into two different directions, two opposing directions. This is what makes it take longer. But the shortest path is to work intensely into these lines, purifying yourself, surrendering yourself to guidance. And when guidance comes, to follow it no matter where it points to, and fast. Because with guidance, if you fall, if you hesitate, you're missing the boat. And the longer you take, the difficult it becomes. It doesn't seem to be that way because, well, you're getting used to preparing yourself. But this is called adapting. And as you are adapting, you lose the transformational power of guidance. So it has to be fast. It has to be because guidance has pointed, not because you agree or you're finally prepared. It is always like jumping in through the abyss. So for the seeker of well-being in you, the quest for truth is boring, painful. It goes against its primary goals and needs. For the seeker of truth in you, the investments of the seeker of well-being, they are destructive in nature, pointless, useless, just a wasting of time. One of these two forces in you will be disappointed. One will be disappointed. Then you choose which one you want to disappoint. You cannot please both at the same time. You're just fooling yourself. So if your investments or if your complaints reflect the absence of realizations, of the quest for truth, and not so much the realizations of pleasure, comfort, security, and all of this, then you know where your investments are going. They are going into the quest of well-being. If the seeker of truth is not getting fruits of its work, and you're in pain because there's no fruits for the seeker of well-being, so you're in the process. If your investments are directed towards the quest for truth. But if this quest for well-being, it's okay, and nothing or very little from the quest for truth, well, again, you can see the tree by its fruits. Time is your most important gift. And it is being used. And there's nothing worse, probably nothing worse for the seeker of truth than a seeker of well-being, a spiritual seeker of well-being. Not any seeker of well-being, of course, just a spiritual seeker of well-being. There's nothing worse, because it's like a fungus that gets into your skin and it's difficult to come out. Because they are reflecting. Well, it seems apparently that they are spiritual-minded people, seekers of truth, and they meditate and do all these things, but they're not. And at the same time they're doing that thing, they're doing the other things that I fed them to do. Taking care of their little lives, aspiring, their dreams, all of these things. These are the most detrimental for the seeker of truth. Because they have the seeker of well-being inside, and they are confused. But the difference is that for those ones, this is good. For those spiritual seekers of well-being, everything's fine. It's good for them. But the seeker of truth has a part in it that says, this is not, but still, the fears, the addictions, the needs, the fragility, the naiveness, the immaturity opens a gap. And they want to believe that. They really want to believe that is possible, to do both things at the same time. It doesn't have to be so difficult. It doesn't have to be so intense. And I can quote this example, that example, all of that. But at the same time, there's something there that says, even for a little bit of discomfort with all of that. And they tend to suppress it because of those examples. They want it to be true. And what have we seen these days? The rhetoric adapting to these spiritual seekers of well-being. Why? Well, go figure. That would be a very long satsang for sure. Okay. So for today it's enough. For those who want to make some reflections and understand that reflections are useless if they are not, how do you say this? If action doesn't follow them. And I know it is a fact that seekers tend to spend a lot of time of reflections, those who actually do it, but following it with action, this is very difficult. But for a seeker of truth, it means that truth is the highest goal. So without those reflections being followed by action, it is pointless, just a waste of mental energy. Because if you're for freedom, then reflections are followed by action, no matter the consequences. If you're using your quest for freedom just as a means to continue to feed your sadness, sorrow, and suffering, because this is the real quest of the seeker of well-being. It doesn't appear, it appears to be something glamorous, but it isn't. It is about maintaining suffering. We can talk this another time. And there's a lot of obstacles to go through. And one of them is this one. Stop using circumstances to feed suffering, sadness, disappointment towards yourself. And this is one of the reasons why these reflections are not followed by action, so that you can continue to contemplate on self-disappointment. And this feeds the other cycles. Okay. So next satsang will be Saturday. Saturday, 9 o'clock in the morning, Brazilian time, UTC -3. Until then, make the best use of your time. Lots.